As you may know, I work with women who have autoimmune conditions, specifically lupus, and who also have thyroid problems or Hashimoto's thyroiditis, digestive issues. And if you've been wondering what it's like to work with me, all you need to do is fill out a really quick form at margaretromero.com/apply, APPLY, and we can discuss which program may be right for you. Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. My name is Margaret Romero. I'm a Columbia-trained functional medicine nurse practitioner, and here I uncover the truth behind chronic illness so that you can finally heal. I'm a women's health and hormone expert and love empowering women to finally live their life fully and powerfully through optimal health. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. You are listening to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Margaret Romero, and this week we have a new guest, Sarah Thompson. She is a licensed acupuncturist and doula, and just came out with this amazing book called Functional Maternity, Using Functional Medicine and Nutrition to Improve Pregnancy and Childbirth Outcomes. This was an amazing interview because she details exactly what you should be doing if you are currently pregnant, planning on being pregnant, what to do after pregnancy. It's just a beautifully written book. We talk about what certain vitamin deficiencies are causing. So, for example, zinc deficiency, there's an increased risk of miscarriages, and how older moms have low CoQ10. And so she talks just like even preconception, what you should be doing. Like you want to get pregnant in about 6 months or in 2 months or next year. You need this book. From preconception to postpartum. I mean, she also talks about postpartum depression and that there's not only one reason. And so we talk about all the different reasons and what to do. It's really a fantastic interview, a beautiful book. So without further ado, on to the show. All right, we are back for another week of the Sacred Medicine Podcast, and today's guest is Sarah Thompson, and we are talking all about functional maternity and how women can prepare for a very healthy pregnancy and also postpartum. So Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with, I love this topic because I feel that a lot of women, they learn they get pregnant and then they take this prenatal vitamin and they're like, I'm good to go. Right. I'll remove a couple of things, not eat sushi, maybe not eat like cold cuts, but pretty good, I'm pretty good. But that falls so short of what is actually necessary. So I'd love for you to dive into like, how do women prepare for a childbirth? Like, what should they be doing? I mean, we can, my gosh, they could start way before even being pregnant, but let's just say a woman or women that are listening right now are just newly pregnant. What should they start doing? What should they start thinking about?
Yeah. And it's, I have like a little handout that I hand off to my patients that definitely summarizes a lot of the complexity that goes into maternal changes in preparation for labor. But I think the biggest thing is educating themselves on what's actually happening in their body and how what they're doing nutritionally and lifestyle wise can affect all these different functions that have to happen in order for labor to occur. And what's always fascinating to me is these maternal changes actually start way before we're even thinking of preparation for labor. And we're talking back 20, 24, 28 weeks in that time frame, we start to see changes in the maternal physiology in preparation for labor and delivery. Mm-hmm. And obviously these different things that are happening, definitely are heavily reliant on what a mom's doing nutritionally, what a mom's doing physically, her stress levels, all of those things. Also very dependent on the baby, because the baby is actually the signal for all these physiological changes. And so as baby matures, these changes start to occur. So when a mom is looking to prepare, right, for labor and delivery, it's a preparation that starts significantly before she's probably even thinking about it. Eating whole foods, all those things become very important nutritionally. But I do think understanding what's happening in her body so that she can better prepare also becomes important. And
Sure.
definitely dive into all of those things because it is pretty complex and fun.
Okay, so name some things that women, I mean, aside from whole foods. So everyone's probably like, yeah, okay, eat healthy.
Right.
But are there some crucial nutrients or crucial foods that women really need to start like really honing in on while they're pregnant?
Yes. And these vary definitely based off of trimester and what's happening in her body. But my like top 10 foods for preparation for labor include things like nuts and seeds, right? Cooked green leafy vegetables, bone in, skin on meat, right? We want the good cuts that have the connective tissue involved there. We're looking at things like organ meat, liver, right? Definitely in my top foods for preparing for labor. Eggs tend to be on my top 10 foods for labor. Other ones we look at are winter vegetables like things good in beta carotene, sweet potatoes, butternut squash. All of that can be very helpful. Bananas are on my top list. Potatoes are on my top list. There's this, I'm trying to think, what are the other ones on my top list? The things that we talk about a lot. Legumes are on that list. Those sorts of foods provide good arrays of the nutrients that we need for these different processes in the maternal physiology to occur. So when we're looking at certain fats in the progression and the formation of things like prostaglandins, we need an omega-6 fatty acid called linoleic acid to make the prostaglandins that start to change and ripen the cervix in preparation for labor. We need things like vitamin A in order for the body to make the oxytocin receptors. So there's all these different nutrients that play into maternal physiology at different stages of gestation, but definitely in that third trimester, those would be foods that we focus on quite a bit.
Amazing. Okay. And right before we got on here, you had mentioned that it obviously really does serve a woman who is preparing for pregnancy. I mean, even what would you say, like a year before? I mean, having a healthy lifestyle and eating this way, like years before, would you say if a woman is thinking like, I want to have a baby, like we're thinking we want to start in like a year or 6 months or 9 months from now, should they start sort of right then changing their diet and doing all of the necessary things?
Absolutely. What's very interesting when we look at preconception nutrition, right? We're talking about typically for women, the health of the eggs, right? That becomes very important because the egg is going to bring, in conjunction with the sperm, everything it needs to start that developmental process in the first trimester. And it's during the follicular developmental phase that the egg accumulates these nutrients, primarily things like zinc and B vitamins that we need for that cascade of reactions to occur in embryonic development. What's interesting to me is, I think we all know women are born with all the eggs that they're going to have in their lives. But there is this progression of development with those primordial eggs before they can be ovulated. And it's about a 9-month process. So if a woman has, I call them sad eggs, right? Maybe they're slightly nutritionally insufficient. It may take 9 months of nutrition work to get those eggs to a point that they're actually healthy and go into having a healthy conception, right? But also a healthy pregnancy. We see a lot of these preconception nutrition insufficiencies and deficiencies being associated with maybe poor placental development in the first trimester, which then cascades into other complications later on down the line in pregnancy. If a woman has been taking birth control, for example, too, that could change her preconception nutritional needs as well. there was a very interesting study that came out this year that showed birth control use, the connection between birth control use and what women have said for a while, that they struggle to conceive after using birth control. And what the study found was that birth control use lowered a hormone called AMH. Now, AMH is a hormone that is produced by those primordial eggs in the ovary. So these eggs that the woman was born with.
Right.
We use it as a measure for low ovarian reserve, meaning if we have low AMH, it means we don't have that many eggs left. We also know that low AMH can also be a sign of that quote unquote sad egg syndrome, is what I call it, where those eggs are just slightly malnourished. They've got some oxidative stress, whatever it is, that they're just not as healthy as they could be. Birth control lowers AMH levels by 30%.
Wow.
So if somebody has been taking birth control in that preconception phase, right, that's something we need to look at, right? And that's a simple test to look at and say, oh, where are your AMH levels? How are we looking there? If they had low ovarian reserve to begin with, that might put them into, a level where we have a lot of work, right, to bring everything up. And if they had pretty robust ovaries to begin with, then they may not be affected by that birth control. But it's something in that preconception preparation phase that we do talk about from a functional medicine standpoint.
I love that. Okay, so would you say that, could you conclude that one of the reasons why women sometimes have a really hard time conceiving is due to their eggs being malnourished? Or what can we conclude from that, from the research you've done?
Yeah, I mean, the malnourishment of the ovary definitely makes a difference in the ability to conceive, right? We do see certain nutritional deficiencies being a higher risk of miscarriage, for example, specifically zinc. Zinc deficiency is associated with a higher risk of miscarriage because zinc actually catalyzes the enzymatic reactions that go into embryonic development, the first stages of embryonic development. We have to have zinc to do that. Now, it comes from both mom and dad, right? Both sides have to contribute the zinc and the B vitamins. And so we also say male factor is, 50%, 40%, depending on which study you look at, of things like recurrent miscarriage or miscarriage associated with nutritional insufficiency, right?
Wow, so that's amazing. I mean, yes, that has to do with, are they getting the deficiency because they're not eating the right way? Or should everyone just sort of be on zinc supplements? Is that enough? Or do you think that making sure it's also coming in food?
Oh, absolutely coming in food, right? Food is by far our better source of nutrition. One of the nuts and seeds are definitely one of our primary sources of zinc in the diet. Yes, we get some in red meat. Yes, we get some in other sources, but I'm a big fan of nuts and seeds. It's easy. They're high. They've got all these other things. Zinc loves proteins, right? You have to have protein to absorb zinc. You have to have zinc to absorb protein. You've also got to have B6. There's this lovely little, little soup of nutrition you have to have for a lot of these vitamins and minerals to work correctly. And that's what you find in food forms. Supplements are great. We use them all the time in the office, but we use them in cases where we need to supplement the diet because we've gotten to a point in insufficiency or deficiency that diet alone isn't going to bring that level up.
Okay. But nuts and seeds are a good combination.
Absolutely. Peanuts are a legume, but they're also a fantastic source of a lot of these proteins and fats and zinc and other vitamins that we love to see in the preconception phase.
And is there one nuts that are better than the other, like macadamia versus cashew versus walnuts?
I don't think so. I'm a big fan of variety as well because they each have slightly different nutritional profiles. And if we focus on just a couple of them, then sometimes we get a little deficient in these other ones that they were just lower in or insufficient. And so variety for me is key. I like pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, hemp seeds. I like chia seeds, almonds, peanuts, cashews, you name it. Just a good variety is key.
Okay, awesome. And what other deficiencies would be making the egg sort of unhealthy or suboptimal?
So B vitamins do play into this quite a bit, right? We're looking at the B complexes that go into DNA methylation. So we're looking at riboflavin B2, we're looking at folate B9, we're looking at cobalamin B12, B6. All these things play into how the DNA gets transcribed in those early phases of embryonic development. And those B vitamins accumulate in those eggs and in the sperm in that primordial developmental process. Other things we look at are antioxidants. We know through research that the eggs and the sperm are really sensitive to things like oxidative stress. Antioxidants help to reduce oxidative stress. One of the ones that has had probably the most research in fertility support is coenzyme Q10. Coenzyme Q10 is used in cellular respiration to not only produce cellular energy, but to clear out oxidative stress from that process. And we do see that the older moms get, the more they are at risk for oxidative stress components to their fertility and preconception health. Taking a coenzyme Q10 supplement can help them. And it's just something we see with age, right? The older we get, the less CoQ10 our bodies produce. And there's always this, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do we age because we don't produce enough coenzyme Q10 as we get older, or are we not producing enough coenzyme Q10 because we're aging? Either way, moms over a certain age have lower CoQ10 levels.
Right.
So pretty standard in my practice anyways, is for my, I hate the term advanced maternal age or geriatric pregnancy moms, those over 35s, we give them a coenzyme Q10 supplement in addition to their prenatal support.
Okay. I love that. And so are there some supplements so it sounds like B vitamins are really good, not only through food, but there are some key elements in terms of supplementation. So like maybe a really good B complex, CoQ10, which I love personally as well. Maybe a zinc, but also making sure that not to get all of your nutrients just from supplements. It should also be coming from foods.
Right. There's so much more that comes from food besides these isolated vitamins and minerals. We've got all these phytonutrients, these, phenols and flavonoids and antioxidants and all these things that also play into body physiology. And so we can take a supplement, right? We have all these great nutrients we talk about, this little prepackaged prenatal that has, quote unquote, everything you need to grow a baby, but we're missing all these other things and they just don't support the way they're supposed to.
Okay. And so are there supplements that women who are pregnant should not take? Is there anything that's really like, oh no, you can't do this?
Yes. I mean, there's always going to be herbs and there's always going to be those sorts of supplements that we recommend not taking because herbs are basically medicinals, right? And some people, that medicinal is not going to be a good fit for them. As far as vitamins and minerals, that is very much dependent on the individual, right? I have a patient right now who has polycythemia vera. She can't take an iron supplement. So we have her on a whole different, prenatal regimen because most prenatal vitamins have additional iron in them. And she can't do that. So it varies very much on what a person can and cannot have as far as, the individual vitamins and minerals. Generically, though, most prenatals are balanced and they're kind of minimally balanced. Very few prenatals are going to give you more than what you need of a specific nutrient. In fact, most prenatals are subpar.
I bet.
So as far as supplements, nutritional supplements that women shouldn't take, I think it's more of a problem that they should be taking them versus not taking them.
Okay, right. So herbals, definitely. Obviously, no one's going to do a detox or any of that. I'm curious, though. So your focus is functional medicine, which is amazing. And so when a woman comes to you, either to prepare her body or she's newly pregnant, are you also doing things like stool testing and whatnot, or not really?
Not really. It depends, right? Some of those tests are very inaccurate in pregnancy because of the changes in immune system responses, hormones. All those things change maternal physiology so much that most of our standard labs are very different in pregnancy. Right? A couple examples, I had a colleague, another functional medicine practitioner, contact me a couple years ago, and he had run a whole bunch of heavy metal panels on a woman who was pregnant. She was third trimester, and her copper levels were quote unquote elevated according to him. And he had contacted me looking for recommendations on how to chelate her safely in pregnancy to get her copper levels down. And I had to kind of step back and go, hold on, time out. Like, I'm concerned that you want to do this simply because it is very normal. And her copper levels were not excessive for pregnancy. For copper levels to be twice the level they were prior to pregnancy and look like toxic copper levels, right? We have 3 different jumping patterns in copper levels in the body at 22 weeks, 27 weeks, and 35 weeks, give or take. Copper levels bump up each time. We get more concerned if copper levels are low and more in that pre-pregnancy normal range than in that upper range. So there's a lot of things that change in the maternal physiology that a lot of these other tests that we would normally use in functional medicine are not accurate and don't give us the information we're hoping for.
I see. Okay. And so, I mean, I would never think about chelating a pregnant woman ever.
Right.
And so what was the end result?
I told him not to, and I recommended he do a little more research into maternal physiology before working with pregnant women, simply because he could have really hurt her in that pregnancy by not understanding that maternal physiology component.
Definitely. Yes. That sounds like a scary concept to chelate a pregnant woman, honestly. My other thing I wanted to mention was going back to what you were saying about the health of sperm and eggs, but also that the biggest component were all of the really great B vitamins. And when a woman has been on birth control for years and years, they were put on it at the age of like 17, they were on it all through college, and now they're in their early 30s. I mean, birth control causes a decrease and decline in B vitamins.
Absolutely.
And so you have all these women. I mean, I can see there's just such a huge pattern here that B vitamin deficiency secondary to birth control pills are causing a suboptimal the health of their eggs. So
absolutely.
This increase in IVF, I mean, is it just the fact of, look, eat really good, healthy, organic food, take some really good supplements before even thinking about getting pregnant, especially if you've been on birth control? Is it that easy? I mean, maybe some people don't even think about this. They're just like getting pregnant. They're just trying to get pregnant, not really thinking about all these things. But is it as simple as that?
For some women, it is. For some women, it is as simple as a missed nutritional deficiency. For others, not so much. And it has nothing to do with anything they did for some of these women. It has to do with what happened in the pregnancy of their mother and her grandmother. So you have to think, right? These eggs that we're born with are developing in our ovaries while we're developing in our mothers. Right? And vice versa. The egg we came from developed in our mother's ovary when she was developing in her grandmother. And we see this, it's, this theory of epigenetics, right? This transfer of genetics. And we see that things that happened during conception, during pregnancy of the grandmother can over generations affect the fertility of the next generation down.
Sure.
Which is fascinating, right?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So there are definitely women out there, and I have them come into my office where they're in their 20s, they've never been on birth control, and they have low ovarian reserve. And it's not that they ate junk their whole childhood or anything like that. It's that they were born with low ovarian reserve because of the pregnancy of their mother.
And can you overcome that?
I don't think so, right? Those are those cases where IVF is the option, but we need to start working on maternal health now. One of the things I talk about in my book is with functional maternity, we're working with the woman in our office, but we're working with the woman in our office to hopefully save future generations, right? We're seeing a pattern of kind of this, ovarian dysfunction, these fertility patterns, increasing pregnancy complications, all these things over the last generation or two, that if we start focusing on the mom in the office and getting her as healthy as possible and preventing these complications as much as we can in them, maybe our goal is, for those who are born with lower ovarian reserve or are born with genetic predispositions to things like preeclampsia, to prevent that in the next generation. So we can start reversing those maternal statistics.
Right. So I'm just thinking about, there's just so many women who are in the process of IVF. I have two things I want to say about that. One is, and I don't know the answer to this because I don't know what type of blood work gets drawn. And I know that there's sort of an FSH and all of those sort of like hormone panels are done. But do IVF clinics, are they checking for a nutritional panel? Like, are they checking B vitamin levels, zinc levels, magnesium levels? Are they doing that?
Not in the ones that I work with. Those are things that I end up having to run. So things like vitamin D deficiency, right? That can definitely affect fertility. It's very common too.
Yes, right.
The estimates are that 90% or more of Americans aren't meeting the minimum dietary requirements for vitamin D. Add in the fact that we use sunscreen on a regular basis to kind of block the sun so we're not getting sunburned. Like, there's a number of factors that go into it. And we see vitamin D deficiency being extremely common, especially in people who are struggling with conception.
Yeah.
But it's very rarely run in conventional medical treatment, whether it's fertility treatment or your general PCP.
Isn't that just absurd? It's insane to me.
It is, because, for a number of reasons, obviously, but I work with patients all over the world, and I'm surprised when I get lab work from their primary carers that do cover these things, right? And the differences in reference ranges too always seem interesting to me, specifically on the vitamin D status, right? Our standard range here in the U.S. is 20 to 100, right? More recent research shows that pretty much anything under 40 is insufficient and deficient, right? You look at, I had a lab from a patient in Canada come back, and their reference range for vitamin D, same standards, was 75 to 200.
Oh, wow.
Right. And they wanted specifically pregnant moms to be at the 75 level.
Yeah.
Right. There was a study, gosh, I can't remember who did it. I'd have to look it up. Study basically talking about pregnancy vitamin D levels and how much dietary vitamin D a mom needed to consume to maintain a 40 on her blood vitamin D levels, serum vitamin D levels, which is what they determined it needed to be at. Maternal serum vitamin D needed to be at 40 for a reduction in vitamin D deficiency associated complications. And what they found is that in pregnancy, moms needed to consume 4,000 international units per day to maintain that level.
Right.
Right. The current RDA for vitamin D is 600.
It's insane. I know. And I have patients of mine who come and who are severely vitamin D deficient. And I work with autoimmune women with autoimmune conditions. So for me, their vitamin D levels needs to be somewhere between 60 and 80. And so anything less than that is not great. But when I see super major deficiency, like severe deficiency, and I said, well, how much did your doctor tell you to take? Oh, he told me to take 1,000. And I'm like, what? That's nothing.
Right.
Nothing. And so, I start at 5,000, but sometimes I'll do more depending on, for a short period of time to kind of boost up that level quicker. But it's so insane, because in medical school, they're not teaching you about supplementation necessarily. They're not teaching you about what vitamins are essential. These are the levels. This is, they're just looking at reference ranges. And it's so common. I see this almost every day, honestly.
Absolutely. Well, and you're a nurse practitioner. What was your nutrition education in school?
I will say that it was minimal. Well, I was emergency medicine track too.
Okay.
And so, there's not that much when it comes to emergency medicine when it comes to that. So, but I grew up with a mother that used supplements. And so I was brought up taking supplements.
Yeah.
And so, and I guess compared to a lot of people who maybe weren't, to me, it's extremely vital for people not only to eat really well, and I talk about food and cooking and eating a lot and how to do that on a healthy basis, almost daily on my IG stories. But I think that there's such a huge lack and a huge hole in sort of conventional medicine standards that there's no discussion about what actually are you eating, and maybe you should stop eating all of that McDonald's or fast foods. There's no nutrient value in there. And then, and then everyone, so when you talk about vitamins, they run to like Walgreens or CVS or Costco and they get their vitamins from there. And I'm like, no, actually, let's stay away from, let's stay away from supplements from there because they're loaded with colors and all this stuff. Or they go to GNC. That's another big one. Vitamin Shop. And I'm like, oh God, those aren't good either.
No, and most of those companies don't do things like third-party testing. And you'll see studies that talk about these over-the-counter supplement brands and the discrepancies on what the label says and what actually gets measured within those supplements. Sometimes higher than what it says, and sometimes lower than what it says. And so it's inconsistent
totally
in the supplementation, in addition to the fact that oftentimes they're using the cheaper, less absorbed forms of these nutrients.
Yeah.
And I ask like your nutrition education from nursing school because, I feel like we put a lot of pressure on physicians because of things like, poor nutrition education, right, in the conventional medical system. And I have a lot of friends who are physicians. My dad's a physician, and a part of me feels bad for them because they were kind of set up for failure nutritionally in their medical school training.
Right.
Nutrition is barely taught in most medical schools. I think that the stats are 71% of medical schools don't provide the minimum recommended nutrition education, which is 25 hours, right? That's not that much. Of those that do, most only provide 14 hours. And I think what ends up being the clinical number of hours of education in nutrition, so actually using it in practice is something closer to 4 hours. And
it's insane. Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, or even less. I mean, it could just be like one class, maybe like a 2-hour class.
We've got 30% of medical schools that don't offer anything. And what they do offer typically is more IV nutrition therapy or nutrition therapy for elderly and for people who can't feed themselves. So not nutrition training that actually applies to public health outside of those scenarios.
Yeah. Right. Or nutrition for, like you said, people that maybe are hospitalized and need the nutrition through the IV and all of that. So, well, I mean, that medical schools are mostly funded by big pharma. And so, they're taught Lipitor for high cholesterol. They're taught, omeprazole for GERD. And so that's what they're taught. I mean, my brother's a physician. Mm-hmm. And so I know I showed him a stool test one day, so sometime last year. And there are words like Bacteroides and Firmicutes and things like that. And I'm like, let me just see if he knows what any of this means.
Right.
And so I showed him the copy of the results of one of my patients. I was like, do you know what any of this means? Were you taught any of this, or does this look familiar to you? And he's like, no, I don't know what this is. And so it's not going to be taught. I mean, because that's functional tests have its own special training in itself. So
yeah, and you're right. It's not going to be taught in medical schools. And I think we need to stop trying to push it. I guess, in a way, stop pushing it onto the physicians that they need to do this and they need to learn this, and actually start to work collaboratively and say, we know our strengths, we know your strengths. Let's come together so we can support these patients more comprehensively.
Yes. And I also want to add that a lot of physicians they think that their way is the only way and that's the only right way.
Mm-hmm.
And so they do not want to necessarily collaborate with us.
Right.
I will have, do you know how many patients have come to me? Oh, yes, I used to work with a naturopath, let's just say. I used to work with a naturopath. And so they told me what I needed to do. But the physician just poo-pooed the whole thing. And so that's what you get too, which leaves the patient feeling like confused, so much confusion as to what's right, who's right.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where it sort of collides. The two, I think conventional medicine is great, when it comes to trauma, cardiac arrest, you fall off, a 12-foot story building, you need conventional medicine, trauma,
Absolutely.
ER. Amazing what they can do. Left ventricular assist device on the bridge to heart transplantation. Amazing. Dialysis. Amazing. Chronic illness, or even something like this, preparing a woman's body.
Mm-hmm.
I would love a world where IVF clinics were all integrating beautifully with functional medicine, and having it be a place where we're going to prepare the eggs, we're giving you this injection, that injection, It's like, how are you eating? Let's talk about that. Let's get you on some really good supplements. The stuff that you're doing in combination with like IVF clinics.
Mm-hmm.
Does this exist?
It does. Yeah, we have definitely groups here in Colorado, right, where we work together, where, practitioners, functional medicine practitioners, nutritionists are working with these moms preconceptionally to help get them where they need to be in conjunction with the IVF clinics to hopefully make better outcomes.
Right. Well, I will say I used to live in Colorado as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Colorado is very progressive. They're very opened, more than a lot of states. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the big fertility clinics here in Colorado was one of the first places to incorporate acupuncture into their IVF treatments.
Oh, nice.
And most of the research that I believe that's done on acupuncture and increased success rates in IVF transfer come from that facility and the work that they did in that incorporation. So and that's been going on for 20 years.
That's amazing. I mean, and a lot of women know. And so they have to go, they know about acupuncture and how well it works when women are trying to get pregnant. But women always have to seek that outside of their IVF stuff. They're like, oh, okay, well, I heard acupuncture was good. So they go and find someone. But having it all under one roof sounds amazing. So does it exist under one roof? Aside from the acupuncture with functional medicine within a IVF clinic, does that exist?
I don't know. I know that there's facilities that have acupuncturists and those sorts of things, but as far as having the functional medicine component to there, I don't have one here that has somebody in-house.
Wouldn't that should be like the next thing. That should
Absolutely.
be right there. That should be like a huge thing that comes together, and then every state has one. And it should be, that would be awesome to have both come together.
It would be great to see, all medical healthcare professions have that collaboration aspect.
Oh my gosh.
Where things like functional medicine are incorporated into everyday care in preventative health and education. we're failing as a society in nutrition education.
Oh my gosh,
The
yes.
general public knows very little about nutrition. And sadly, where did you learn nutrition, right? If you hadn't gone through functional medicine, right, where would you have gotten your nutrition education? It's primarily in the school systems,
Right.
right?
Right.
And the school systems, we could get on a whole other topic on the school systems and their nutrition hypocrisy. But the school system is the primary source of nutrition education for Americans, period. Yet we have school nutrition programs that contradict what we're teaching kids in class. So if a child is getting, studies will show that in order for children to retain information, they need 40 hours of basically repetitively hearing the same things just in different ways, right?
Right.
They don't get that in nutrition, right? They're getting about 7 hours of nutrition throughout their childhood. Way less than what's needed to actually retain that information.
Right.
And then they go to lunch or breakfast at school and they're given, Otis Spunkmeyer double chocolate chip muffins for breakfast.
Right.
Right. Or they're getting
pizza for lunch.
Yeah. Or the Smucker's Uncrustable sandwiches at lunch is an option with a bag of chips.
Ugh.
Right. But then you're being told in class to eat your vegetables, but the vegetables aren't an option in the lunchroom.
Isn't it insane? Yeah. Exactly. I mean, and I know that there was this huge movement, or there still is, on like bringing healthy food into the schools. But is it infiltrating everywhere? Is it only for upper to middle class schools, or is it infiltrating like all classes, like through all states? I don't know.
It's going to be almost district to district, state to state, because of the way the school nutrition programs are funded, if that makes any sense, right? And there's definitely studies that show that, children who eat school lunches, and specifically if they're eating breakfast and lunch at school, University of Michigan State University. Oh gosh, I can't remember which of the Michigan schools it was. I think it's Michigan State. Did a study that linked more frequent school food program consumption to a higher risk of childhood obesity and early onset of preventative disease.
Okay.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Again, this is where these children, where most of us are getting our nutrition information, and what we're getting told, or what we're getting fed, I should say, that should be a representation of these guidelines, is making children sick.
Right.
And we wonder why 50% Americans have at least one preventable chronic disease right now.
Mm-hmm. I love this conversation. What I wanted to also talk about is postpartum depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to see, in your experience, why do some women have it and why do others not? And how to get rid of it, how to make it, or even how to prevent it completely from happening.
Yeah. Now, postpartum depression is definitely a complicated subject. And just like everything in pregnancy, there is no one cause of the progression to that condition, right? There's certain things that we definitely take into account, right? I have a concept I talk about a lot that's called preparing for preparing, right? The things that we do in the trimester before affect the trimester we're in, right? And postpartum is a fourth trimester. And so we'll see certain things that we did or did not do in the third trimester, or certain maternal patterns and physiological things such as anemia, right? Iron deficiency anemia in the third trimester is linked with a higher incidence of postpartum depression, right?
Okay.
So things like that, thyroid function in the third trimester, if we have hypothyroidism that goes unnoticed, we can see more postpartum depression, right? Nutritional deficiencies. Again, the B vitamin components. B vitamins are really important for how our body makes our neurotransmitters, that iron, vitamin D, all these things go into how our body makes those neurotransmitters. And so we can see nutritional deficiencies in the third trimester causing postpartum depression type patterns in the fourth trimester. Mm-hmm. Now, you also have to take into things take into account things like the actual birth process, right? Was the birth smooth? Did we have trauma, right? And birth trauma is actually significantly more common than we think, right? And for some people, birth trauma may not look like birth trauma to somebody else. And so each case is very different on the perceived stress, the physical stress, all those things on how somebody perceives the trauma of their birth experience, right? It's very subjective. But that can be an emotional cause of postpartum depression.
Sure.
Right? We also have genetics. Some people are more prone genetically to having depressive type patterns, anxiety type patterns. Now, in treatment and prevention, it's kind of taking all of those things together and knowing what the individual's, biochemical identity is and supporting and treating them as an individual, right? Taking into account their genetics plus their nutrition during pregnancy with their birth experience to hopefully prevent or treat postpartum depression in that fourth trimester.
That makes so much sense. Definitely. And so we're looking, I'm assuming that when a woman works with you, you are doing, blood panels to check for vitamin deficiency. So they wouldn't necessarily be going in with any iron deficiencies or vitamin D deficiencies, right? If there were thyroid issues, wouldn't that be picked up early on?
Thyroid panels are not run as normal maternity blood work. That is specialized blood work that most pregnant women will never have run. And it's very interesting to me because
that is so
right.
Yeah.
Because what are some of the common complaints in pregnancy that we kind of just chalk off to just, oh, you're pregnant. That's to be expected,
Fatigue,
right? Fatigue, right?
Yeah.
Changes in weight gain, right? All these things that can be a sign of low functioning thyroid. And it's very interesting because the thyroid plays a huge part, thyroid hormones, in embryonic development, fetal development, right? We see in the first trimester, HCG actually hijacks the thyroid because it can mimic TSH in the body and stimulates an excessive production of T4 and T3 with the idea of stimulating placental and fetal development, right? So it's normal to have a little bit of a hyperthyroid type pattern in the first trimester. And I always find it very interesting. There is a study that showed that TSH levels over 2.5 increase the risk of miscarriage in the first trimester. But that's
TSH?
But that's within our normal TSH ranges.
Right.
So a lot of times people with underfunctional thyroid in pregnancy get missed. And throughout the whole pregnancy, if we're just draining that poor underfunctioning thyroid the whole pregnancy without ever testing it, right? Then after birth, well, we get an extra demand because now we need that to stimulate breast milk production and some other things. Then we see a hypothyroid pattern where we can get fatigue and depression.
I see. And so that is due to what? When it becomes low functioning in postpartum, it's due to
so many causes, right? Maybe it's autoimmune and it was missed, right? We have an autoimmune Hashimoto's component that got missed. There's a number of women who get diagnosed with Hashimoto's postpartum, right? They had it before, most likely. It just affected them more because of the demand on the thyroid, right?
Got it.
Things like iodine deficiency, zinc deficiency, again, vitamin D deficiency, all those things, selenium, go into thyroid function. And any one of those being low outside of an autoimmune condition can cause low functioning thyroid because you can't make thyroid hormone if you don't have tyrosine protein and you don't have iodine or zinc. Zinc is what TPO enzymes are made from, right? We need zinc for TPO to work. So if you're deficient in any of those, you can have a hypofunctioning thyroid because it just can't make the thyroid hormone even if you wanted it to. It doesn't have the foundation and the constituents to do it.
Yeah.
So I run thyroid levels probably significantly more than most people working in maternity, simply because prevention is easier than treatment. right? If we can find it early and support that thyroid, we're less likely to have that hypothyroid pattern postpartum.
It amazes me because for me, thyroid, I work primarily with women. And so the majority of women that come to see me have autoimmune conditions. And so they have fatigue. And so thyroid is always, I check thyroid in every single one of my patients. It's a must. It's part of my routine, set of blood work. And so for me, for a woman who is pregnant, to not have that checked is another, like, are you kidding me? Why is that not a routine thing, a full thyroid panel? It should be for every woman.
Yeah. I will say a lot of the IVF clinics do run thyroid panels before conception and during the first trimester.
Are they running a full panel or are they just a TSH?
Depends on the doctor. I've seen both.
Okay. Because just the TSH really doesn't tell me much.
Right. I know.
Because you can have Hashimoto's and still have a normal TSH.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then everything gets missed, and then a woman ends up getting postpartum depression, and then they get put on, antidepressants.
Yeah.
Without really addressing the root cause.
Right.
Okay. Well, this was such an amazing conversation. Was there anything that you wanted to just leave us with, or anything sort of like really important that you wanted to end the conversation with?
No, I think we did a good job of touching on.
Yeah, I think so too.
Got off on a couple tangents, which is always fun, right? I am always available for questions. If anybody does have further questions and are looking, just to talk, they're more than welcome to shoot me an email at hello@functionalmaternity.com. They can always visit the website. I have tons of articles on the website. We're doing more all the time just to continue to push education to pregnant women and to practitioners like yourself. If anybody is interested in getting more information about my book, Functional Maternity, Using Functional Medicine and Nutrition to Improve Pregnancy and Childbirth Outcomes, you can also find that info on the website, www.functionalmaternity.com, or you can find the book on Amazon and select book retailers.
Awesome. And then you're also on Instagram?
I am on Instagram. We are at functional.maternity, and we are also on Facebook.
Under the same name?
Under the same name, yes.
Awesome. Okay. Sarah, thank you so much. This has been such an amazing conversation. I hope that the women listening can forward this, share this with women that may be preparing for pregnancy or are newly pregnant. I think it's never too late, right? Even if you're 6 months pregnant, I think that getting, a look at your nutrition, all of it, would be still a good idea, right? It's never too late for someone to work with you, right?
Right. Never too late. We definitely work with women. I had a patient actually a couple weeks ago who was 36 weeks with a small for gestational age baby, and we, are going to help her, right? So
awesome. I love it. Sarah, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom, and I am sure that this will help so many women just to kind of open their eyes a little more as to what is really necessary during this amazing time of their lives. Being pregnant, pre and post is also so vital.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Your time today. Thank you.
So for all the show notes and you want to learn more about Sarah, head on over to margaretromero.com/episode 213 and pick up her book, or give it as a gift. Give it to one of your girlfriends that is pregnant or is looking to be pregnant. It's just a perfect gift for any woman that is thinking about getting pregnant, in the next couple of months or 9 months or next year, because it is such good prep. You want to prep your body before pregnancy. So that's it for today. Thank you all for being here, for being part of my podcast family, and wherever you are in the world, I hope you are safe and happy and healthy. I'll talk to you all next week. Bye for now. If you have been inspired and have learned so much from these interviews, I would love for you to head on over to iTunes, leave a review, and subscribe to the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.